Human Rights and Social Issues in China. My name is Alanis Wisher. I am a freshman and a psychology major. Overview of human rights in China. Today, I'll explain how China's political structure and policies impact freedoms such as religion, expression, cultural identity, and personal privacy. I will also discuss how suppression of religious freedom can lead to erosion of cultural heritage. State control. All religious organizations must register with the government-run bodies such as the Chinese Patriotic Catholic Association, the Three Self-Patriotic Movement, state-run Buddhist and Taoist associations, and Islamic Association of China. Through these bodies, the CCP controls sermons and teaching materials, leadership appointments, finance and property, and religious holidays and events. Any religious activity outside of these organizations are often called unregistered or underground. It is considered illegal and can lead to harassment, surveillance, fines, or arrest. Suppression of minority religions. The most serious violations involve Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, reports of mass detention camps, forced labor, strict surveillance, bans on religious dress, restrictions on mosque attendance, and criminalization of common religious practices such as fasting on Ramadan. Tibetan Buddhists have heavy restrictions on monasteries, limitations on the teaching of the Tibetan language, surveillance of monks and nuns, and the exile of Dalai Lama. The state treats these groups as threats to national unity or extremism, which they see as justification to intense repression. Censorship and destruction of religious materials. Examples include removal of crosses from churches, banning of religious texts not approved by the state, destruction of Sunnitization of mosques and temples, and online censorship of religious content. These actions aim to weaken independent religious identity and rewrite spiritual beliefs to align with the state ideology. Also, as mentioned in my first podcast of the topic of social credits and the surveillance in China, people in China may also face constant fear of being watched and monitored on their phones, which can discourage one's attendance and participation in their own faith. Effects of religious freedom violations. Psychological and social impacts on believers can include chronic fear among religious practitioners, loss of spiritual community and cultural identity, trauma from detention, forced assimilation, and self-censorship to avoid scrutiny. For many, practicing their religion becomes emotionally burdensome or dangerous. Erosion of cultural heritage. For groups such as Uyghurs and Tibetans, religious traditions are inseparable from cultural identity. When religion is restricted, traditional festivals and rituals fade, languages tied to religious practices are weakened, architecture and sacred spaces are destroyed, and generational transmission of culture breaks down. Cultural diversity in China is diminished and minority identities face long-term erosion. International criticism. China's religious policies have led to sanctions from Western communities, UN investigations, international calls for genocide designation, particularly regarding Uyghurs, and negative media coverage and global activism. China faces reputational damage, affecting global relationships, trade negotiation, and foreign policy dynamics. Loss of religious pluralism. Religious freedom is often considered a foundational human right. When it is restricted, it signals a broader pattern of repression, such as limits on speech, limits on assembly, limits on cultural expression, and state control over personal belief. Citizens experience a reduction in overall freedom, not just religious freedom. Overall, violations of religious freedom in China comes from the government's desire to maintain political control, ideological conformity, and social stability. However, the consequences are far-reaching. The suppression of culture, psychological harm to its believers, social fragmentation, and international backlash. These issues go beyond religion. They reflect broader tensions between state authority and individual rights in modern China. Putting an end to religious freedom violations in China requires action at several levels: international pressure, legal reforms, technological restrictions, and support for persecuted communities all play essential roles. While progress may be gradual, sustained global attention and coordinated efforts can limit abuses and gradually improve conditions for religious believers in China.